Morning. Another day, another real-world test. Today we're doing on the Oppo Find N, Oppo's first folding phone. Now, if you're not familiar, I'm going to use this phone as my normal phone. My SIM card's in it. We're going to take photos on it and some of its competitors, put those up on the screen so you can see how it does. We'll also check in on the battery by the end of the day, and we'll talk about some of the features I like and don't like, all while we explore a bit. But first things first. Coffee. Check. And I stopped to get coffee at a place called Blue Bottle. Now, it's a chain, and I don't really like that. I think it was actually bought by Hershey's at one point. And this, at least, is a chain that has better coffee than the other chains that you know of. The reason we were being forced to go to a chain for coffee is because we are in Midtown Manhattan, which is kind of the part of Manhattan with all of the skyscrapers. It's the part that you usually see in movies. Some people work here, but most of us don't come here willingly. Today, though, we did that because we're a little bit of sightseeing. It is the day after Christmas. But while we're here, let's talk a little bit about the design of this phone. So this is the Oppo Find N, and it's Oppo's first folding phone. But they made a point in their presentation to tell us this is actually their 6th prototype over the last 4 years, and just the first that they're making commercially available. And honestly, it does kind of feel that way. It feels like it's not quite a first attempt. It's a little more refined than that. Of course, every folding phone company has learned from the ones before them, and Samsung definitely paved a lot of that road, publicly showing both triumphs, failures, and their own refinements. And actually, the inner display here is made by Samsung even. But Oppo did actually change things up a bit and added some pretty clever things hardware-wise. Now, firstly, they have their own designed hinge. That helps with the ultra-thin glass screen to not have as much of a crease as, say, the Galaxy Fold3 or the Z Flip 3. And it also folds completely flat without any sort of gap. And they went for a slightly different shape that sits somewhere size-wise between the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 and the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 3, but with the more productivity-focused angle of the Fold 3 compared to the more compact-focused Z Flip 3. And frankly, I like it. Now, it's slightly thicker than the Z Fold 3, but it's shorter and wider, and so the outside display is a bit nicer to use, in my opinion, than the Z Fold 3's, as that one has always kind of felt a little cramped to me because it was just really skinny. Besides that, the hardware itself just feels pretty solid. The phone just feels really good and just kind of has a good weight to it. Now, while we're out exploring, today's sponsor is back at my apartment, making sure that it's clean when we get back. This is the Narwal T10, a clever 2-in-1 robot vacuum and mop, and winner of one of Time's best inventions of 2020. It's easy to set up. You simply plug in the base, open the app, and connect the robot to Wi-Fi, and then just tell it to map your place. Now, unlike most robot vacuums that just bounce randomly across the room and hope they get everything, the T10 uses its LiDAR to see all of the walls and furniture in the house and make a map of it all, so it can then use that to efficiently plan out its route to clean every inch. And since it has LiDAR, it can identify different rooms, which you can customize and tell it to just clean a specific area if you need, as well as recognize furniture, even if it's moved, along with anything else on the floor to avoid it and clean around it. And with a quick swap of the magnetized modules on the bottom, you can go from smart vacuum to smart mop in seconds. And thanks to sensors that tell it when its mop is dirty, it'll head back to the base station automatically, suck up the dirty water into a special tank, have clean water with a special detergent re-soak the mop, and go right back out until the job is done. If you want to learn more about the Narwal T10, check out the link below in the description, and thanks to Narwal for sponsoring this video. So this is Bryant Park, and every other time of year it has a large lawn here that people come to sunbathe or picnic on. But during the winter, it has what they call a winter village, and it's basically a bunch of pop-up little huts that have various shops and food stalls in them. And that lawn becomes New York City's only free ice skating rink. Now, it is free, but around this time of year, around Christmas, you will spend a lot of time trying to get into it. Now, I'm sure you're familiar at this point with this type of concept of folding phone, compared to like the clamshell one of the Z Flip 3, for example. These are essentially tablets that you can fold up and fit in your pocket. Now, opening up the Oppo Find N, we have a similarly square aspect ratio on the display compared to the Z Fold 3s, albeit a half an inch smaller at 7.1 inches versus 7.6. But it is very slightly wider than it is taller, the opposite of the Z Fold 3. And this actually helps for things like watching videos, so that you don't have to turn the device to get the smaller black bars. But the downside is that even if you have auto rotation off, some apps in full screen will auto rotate themselves. And there's no way I can see to easily stop that from happening. You can, though, for any app, go into the settings and change the aspect ratio from full to 16:9 or 4:3. But then, of course, you don't get to use the full display, which, kind of defeats the purpose. Now, you can, of course, rotate the phone to fix this, but it just feels weird, and it's kind of annoying to have to do all the time. And both the Oppo Find N and the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 3 have some issues with apps because of their very square aspect ratio. But that slightly more horizontal aspect for the Find N means that a lot more need to be cropped or the phone needs to be rotated. And it's really an Android issue more than it is the manufacturers of these phones, right? Because Android just assumes that a phone is going to be held vertically in your hand, right? And so if it senses that the width is more than the height, it thinks you turned it sideways. And honestly, I just feel like Android at this point should just understand that there are other form factors, different aspect ratios, and it should just do all of this automatically. It shouldn't be on the OEMs, but maybe it'll come eventually. Now, both phones have a 120 hertz display on the larger display, which means that the screen refreshes up to 120 times a second, and that just means that animations, scrolling, some games will look smoother. And both phones actually automatically control the refresh rate, so it'll drop it down when things aren't moving to save battery. The outside display on the Oppo, though, is a more traditional 60 hertz versus the Z Fold 3's 120 on both. So you just won't get those faster refresh rates when using the outside display. We also don't have any pen support for the Oppo, like we do the S Pen on the new Z Fold 3. Don't know how much you use that, but something to know. And right now we're in front of Saks Fifth Avenue, which is one of the many department stores on Fifth Avenue that does those world famous window displays. And they even have a now famous light show that incorporates the front of the store facing Rockefeller Center, which runs every 10 minutes for about 5 minutes. But this tradition of using elaborate window scenes instead of just putting the normal mannequins in the windows showing the store's wares is claimed to have been started by Macy's in 1878 when R.H. Macy, the owner at the time, took porcelain dolls and put them in an elaborate scene in the windows, and everyone stopped to watch it. And judging by the amount of people out here today, it's clearly still working for the stores. Okay, well, let's talk a little more about this phone. For software, it's running Oppo's ColorOS, which to me has gotten way better over the last couple of iterations. But this version that I have here, because this is the Chinese model of the phone, is missing Google services. Now, Oppo did give me Google services on my review unit, and if there is an international version down the road, then it'll most likely come pre-installed. And I'm sure that'll fix the little weird glitches that I've been experiencing because of probably sideloading Google. Now, I can say that I have used the Oppo Find X3 Pro, and I had none of these issues, so you can check out that video if you're curious about that. Something that is interesting, though, is the customizations that they made to help you take better advantage of the folding phone format. One that I love is the fact that even though you can set specific apps on most of these kinds of folding phones to remain open on the outer display when you're using them on the inner one and then close the device, like Samsung does, but Oppo added a feature here where when you close the phone, it has a subtle prompt to swipe up on the outside display to continue using the app there. And if you don't do anything in 3 seconds, it just times out and the display turns off. Now, I think that's a great way of handling that instead of having to force specific apps to do that every time, so that I can just decide in the moment if I'm going to continue using that app or just shut the phone and be done. Also, shutting the phone to be done, very satisfying on all folding phones, including this one. There are some useful gestures that they added here as well, like the ability to pinch with 4 fingers to turn an app into a small, movable, and resizable window. And you can also swipe up and hold on an open app to do this too, and then swipe this to the side to sort of minimize the app if you want. And you can swipe down from off the top of the screen with 2 fingers to split the app to 1/2 of the screen to open another one next to it, and can adjust the border as needed. They also have some of the more, I guess, sort of expected software tweaks, like the ability to use a laptop mode with the positionable hinge that just stays put wherever you leave it. And you can use the keyboard on 1/2 and kind of use it again like a laptop, but just like the Z Fold 3, it looks equally ridiculous. We also have some apps optimized for this folded position, but as with most of these devices, they're really just some of the stock apps like music, video player, etc. With the camera being the only one I really found that is useful, as you can of course use it as its own tripod. It won't work with most other apps, same as other folding phones, even though Samsung did actually add their own way of forcing this on the Z Fold 3, which I found really useful in some scenarios. But again, Android just needs to put these things in so they work universally. And this is the Rockefeller tree. And this is as close as I'm gonna get to it because it is crazy here. Across from Saks, we have Rockefeller Center, the skyscraper that is famously home to NBC. And of course, during this time of year, for having a very large Christmas tree. The tree is usually scouted by the head gardener of Rockefeller Center from various places in the northeastern US and even Canada sometimes. But this year, it was donated from Maryland, making it the first Rockefeller tree from that state, actually. It was lit on December 1st this year and usually will come down in about mid-January. When it does, though, it'll be donated to Habitat for Humanity, as it has been since 2007, and it's a nonprofit that'll use the lumber from the tree to build homes for people in need. Okay, for the cameras, we have basically the same cameras as we had on the Oppo Find X3 Pro, except that we have a 16 megapixel ultra-wide compared to the Find X Pro's 50 megapixel ultra-wide. We have the exact same 2x optical telephoto camera and the exact same 50 megapixel main camera, but all three cameras have a slightly wider field of view than the same ones on the Oppo Find X3 Pro for some reason. We also have the same 32 megapixel selfie camera on the Find N as we did on the Find X3 Pro, but we have two of them, one for when the screen is closed and one for when it's open, which is nice to see Oppo keeping the experience the same regardless of whether the phone is open or closed, unlike the Fold 3 that opted for a lesser quality, albeit kinda clever, under display camera for the inside. And for video, we can shoot in up to 4K at 60 frames per second on the main and telephoto rear cameras, but not the ultra-wide. That is limited to 4K 30. And the two selfie cameras can shoot up to 1080p in 30 frames per second. We also have a super steady mode for all of the cameras. They use a software to make the footage more stable, but it will limit you to 1080p 30 frames per second, regardless of what camera you use. And of course, we have all of these Disney characters on them that I'm sure are properly licensed. Yeah, for sure. They're definitely licensed by Disney. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. Let's go around Christmas time to where all of the tourists are during Christmas time. Anyway, we survived and it is 9:08 p.m. and we are at 24%. And here's my screen on time and my usage for anyone who's curious about that. Now I have to say right off the bat, it feels like the battery on this phone is better than the Z Fold 3s. Like, I had a very hard day, as I usually do with these real-world tests and filming a ton, and it is still going, which is impressive. And if you're curious, here's another day where I was not doing a real-world test, so you have something else to compare it to. Truthfully though, I just kind of like the fact that we have more folding phone options. As much as I think we all like to see the more eccentric designs that are like tri-fold and, you know, have the motorized rolling thing, those are cool, but they just don't feel like they're gonna be very useful anytime soon. I just, you know, they'll eventually probably mature and then become useful, but until then it's nice to see these more, dare I say, like more traditional folding formats just kind of being done with different aspect ratios and form factors. Like you can get this Oppo Find N in the shorter and wider style compared to the clamshell of the Z Flip 3 and the taller, skinnier Z Fold 3. And the interesting thing about this phone is that it is $500 less than the Z Fold 3. And so new form factors, lowering prices, all of that is good for all foldables everywhere. Let me know what you guys think, though, in the comments below of this phone, of this format. Always appreciate hearing from you guys on how I can maybe improve this series. If you like this video, though, please thumbs up it or share it. It's greatly appreciated. Also, check out the rest of the channel. If you like what you see there, please subscribe and ding the bell next to the word subscribe so you get notified when I do new videos. As always, though, regardless, thanks for watching. Always with the noises.